By the way, I'm Jim Martin, former extension weed control specialist, kind of retired now, but still hanging around here. I spent a fair amount of my career trying to control ryegrass. Lloyd's out here spending the last of his career trying to grow it. Here's, over the years, a number of my colleagues in weed science have done work on trying to manage this weed. And it's a very competitive weed. It does a lot of things that have some drawbacks to it that really has caught our attention. It's competitive. It's the most competitive weed that we have in wheat. One plant will reduce yield potentially by as much as 4%. One plant per square foot. In wheat, that's very, very competitive. Prolific seed producer, produces hundreds of seed per plant. Harbors certain pests, voles being one of those. Some diseases. It's very, very expensive to control in wheat. You're probably spending anywhere from about 12 to 15 to maybe as much as 20 some dollars an acre. That, and in today's standard, for wheat especially, that's pretty expensive. It's difficult to control in no-till corn. I won't dwell on that right now, but it can be controlled. I know in Lloyd's experiences with his cover crop, it can be controlled, but it's expensive and you've got to be very timely. And last on this, and I'll be at the top of the list, is prone to developing herbicide resistance. The ryegrasses in general is probably one of the few species that has lots of different, that is resistant to lots of different herbicide chemistries. In Kentucky, we have actually voided the major bullet. We do have some resistance in Kentucky, and it's been identified, but the good news is it's very isolated cases. In fact, you just really don't hear much about herbicide-resistant ryegrass in Kentucky, but you go to further south of us, and it's a very significant problem for those folks. But I think part of the reason is that we don't have a problem with it nearly as much as others is because we followed in a rotation, that corn, wheat, soybean rotation. It sees lots of different chemistries, and it's just a different environment for each of those crops. And that goes a long ways to help minimize the effect of this weed. All right, thank you, friend. Now, we started in November and sprayed paraquat at 3 pints. 3 pints of paraquat here, and then every month we go to the next spot, spray it, wait a month, spray it. Here's what we sprayed in November, and this is what we got. Did the paraquat not work? What happened here as opposed to the next one back, and especially some of those others? Got a clue? Why do we have so much here? Timing. Timing of what? Well, you get half credit, okay?
Timing of the winter.
Yeah. Now, how about timing of the emergence of ryegrass? Last fall, when we planted this weed, it was dry. It was dry for a few weeks after we planted it, and we decided not to spray in October. We said we'll put it off till November. We did, and we started spraying, and there wasn't very much ryegrass there. Started raining, and lo and behold, this is what happened. This is emergence of ryegrass after that paraquat. Okay, so if we were going to pull the trigger, if we planted wheat in October, we were planting a no-till and we sprayed glyphosate or paraquat, whatever you want to call it, as a burn down. There really wasn't very much ryegrass up. Excuse me. You give it a few weeks, have moisture, lo and behold, there's your ryegrass. Now this is, why sometimes in a dry fall, we can spray our post products. You think you're on your way in the fall and you're done. You come back next spring, you find out, what? Because it was fairly dry in the fall, you didn't get all your ryegrass up and growing. And that, in the last fall in particular, I think is what happened here. We pulled the trigger too early. Sprayed in December, that's what you got as emergence. You get in January, there's a little bit. February, thank you, and then in March. Bottom line is, ryegrass is one of those plants that you can't always predict and when it's going to be up and when most of your population is there. Okay? All right. Y'all familiar with a product called Valor? We use it in wheat. Well, actually, we use it for a number of years in corn and soybeans. And it's not too long ago, it was labeled for use in wheat. And it actually has some ryegrass activity, but I wouldn't talk about it as being a very competitive treatment compared to some of the other ones you're going to see on down here. But the mere fact that it does bring something to the table for some control, you're going to see some differences here. The problem with Valor is it carries some baggage with it. There's sometimes you can get some injury to wheat. Using Valor in Kentucky, it's got to be preferably in a no-till situation where you've got plenty of residue cover. Plant the seed at least a minimum of 1 inch in depth. And yeah, those are the two main factors. Now, what we did here, from here, including those plots there, we came through with a disc, cultipacker, and disc this 3 times. All this from this point on up here was disc just 1 time, and the reason we disc this area here is we, in order to establish our ryegrass populations, we seed it, then lightly disc that, get those seeds incorporated so we can get us a good stand of ryegrass to evaluate from. Now, when we plant the wheat, we have a skip row, the 3rd row on each side of the plot, and that helps us, and when we're rating, we can see what control, if we were spraying herbicides, we can see down inside that canopy there with that skip row and get a judgment as to how well it's performing in that particular environment. We got Valor sprayed in both strips. Remember, this strip was tilled. This one was tilled only 1 time. This one was tilled 3 times. This one had about 30% cover of residue on the soil, about 66 to 70% control, or not control, but cover. That is cornstalk cover. Okay, so which of these two would you expect there to possibly be a problem with, if there's going to be a problem with anything with Valor? Right. This one right here in the conventional till. Remember what I said, one of the requirements, you got to have residue cover. That goes a long way to protect any injury from, especially when this plant starts to emerge to the soil. And if there's any herbicide hanging around there on the surface and it rains real hard, you can pretty well assure that you're probably going to get some injury in that particular case. So our goal was here is to see, can we mimic and show injury? Yeah, it happened, okay? As much as anything, and you'll see some of these little holes through here. Yeah, that's where we did see some injury from Valor, okay? The, probably as much as anything is, when it rained quite a bit in this particular part of the plot, stayed wet, and one of those things with Valor is if you got a wet soil conditions, you can pretty well sure that you're probably gonna get some injury with it, okay? Really wet soil conditions, problem with Valor. This was Valor at 2 ounces, Valor at 4 ounces, that's twice the labeled rate of Valor, by the way. Then Valor at, again at 2 ounces in the far back. Come on and follow me, folks. For Valor, hey folks, I tell you what, for Valor, it doesn't get any better than this, okay? This is pretty decent control with Valor. Now, I won't brag on it that you don't do that consistently, but for Valor that's controlled mostly on broadleaf weeds, on ryegrass, this. Are y'all familiar with axiom? Do y'all know what axiom is? What the chemistry is? Axiom takes, it has Syncor or metribuzin and flufenicid, which is a product very similar to Dual. It's got that type of activity, that chlorocidamide activity. And one of the first products that we actually labeled for use in wheat, I'll call it somewhat of a soil applied treatment for residual control, although spiking here is spiking of the wheat, okay? It's gotta be up. It's just not safe to spray, especially the combination of both Syncor and this flufenicid pre-emergence to wheat. Because if it rains and you plant, it rains that day, gets down into where that seed is, you've got some problems with injury from both chemistries, to be honest about it, okay? So that is a risk. What do you think about control?
Looks pretty good.
Oh, it looks good. Yes, it is unbelievably good. For this particular product, that doesn't work any better than that.
And you want it to just barely emerge when you spray.
Correct. That is probably, if you hit it in, ideally you don't want any ryegrass to come up, but we all know that there's going to be some there. And it just so happened that it, at the right time, the axiom worked, and it worked real well.
And it's cheap.
Zidua, BASF product. Can be put down as a delayed pre. That's how we put it here. Ideally before weed is up, and the radicle, or not the radicle, but the root starts to develop, and you have somewhere around a ½ inch of growth underneath the soil. Zidua, the 1 1/4 ounces. Control-wise, it's every bit as good as what we saw over there. Okay, it's not perfect, and by the way, none of these are 100% control. But for pre-emergence control in wheat, that's, you know what, for several years we've never had what I call a really good product for soil residual control of grasses or broadleaf weeds. Zidua has some activity on broadleaf weeds, but some of the more common ones like Cambid is not very good. Anthem Flex is an FMC product. It's got the same thing as Zidua in it, and carfentrazone, which is a product called axiom. It's an FMC product, so it's a premix of those two materials, and it's about the same as Zidua. Okay, there is a few escapes, but you don't have nearly the growth and the amount of ryegrass as you see here in the untreated checks. This product for broad spectrum control of weeds, it's pretty good. It's got Valor. Fierce is a Valor plus Zidua. Okay, that's that mix. And yeah, you'll see a little bit of grass, but it's very similar to what you get in these last two components. We don't have is the broadleaf weed pressure. Wherever I have ryegrass, you just don't get a lot of broadleaf weed pressure. Okay. Outside of the soil residual herbicides, probably the next best thing that's ever happened to us is in wheat is some of these post-emergent products that we can now control some of these problematic grasses, especially ryegrass. PowerFlex applied in the fall, somewhere around December the 2nd, and then PowerFlex applied in the spring, roughly mid-February. Okay, fall and spring. Y'all come on and look, tell me, which do you have the most faith in, fall applications or spring?
What is PowerFlex?
PowerFlex is, it's an ALS inhibitor, peroxysulfone. It's
Flexstar.
Flexstar, yeah.
That's not the same.
No, it's not the same thing, correct. Okay, y'all looked at it, tell me. Spring. Now, do y'all really agree with him? I mean, does he look like a trustworthy guy? You're a trustworthy guy, okay? I believe every word you said. Fall and spring, no doubt, I think that in this particular case, spring looks better, and I think if you look at some of our data that we've gotten in the last few years, fall applications probably are not quite as consistent as the spring ones are, okay? Ideally, you know, the industry in itself really would much rather you spray in the fall, and in my case, I like to make sure I get it all, and to get it all, sometimes spring applications are going to be better than fall. If you have a season where this stuff grows real fast and gets pretty big and dense, then a fall application you just got to do that. Okay. Okay, Osprey. This is the Axial is an ACCase inhibitor. I get ahead of myself. ACCase. Are you familiar with products like the old Fusilade, Select, Post? All those are what we call post graminicides that we use in soybeans. Gosh, for a long time. Axial is designed specifically for wheat in that chemistry. It's different than the ALS inhibitors. it doesn't carry that risk that you have with top dressing nitrogen. So if you're got ryegrass in the spring and it's time to top dress nitrogen and you feel like you need to spray, what are you going to use? This or those? This one. Puts you at less risk. Okay?